Hello and welcome to Underdogs, Bootstrappers, and Game Changers. This is for those of you that are starting with nothing and using business to change their stars. Motivating people who disrupted industry standards. This is the real side of business. This isn't Shark Tank. My aim with this podcast is to take away some of the imaginary roadblocks that are out there. I want to help more underdogs because underdogs are truly who change the world. This is part of our Content for Good initiative. All the proceeds from the monetization of this podcast will go to charitable causes. It's for the person that wants it. Hello and welcome to another episode of Underdogs, Bootstrappers, and Game Changers, episode 6. And I'm so excited today because I have Scherrie Prince. And one point I want to make in this little intro here is the power of podcasting, the power of networking, the power of making new friends. And I was on Shrieve's podcast a couple weeks ago. I felt like we hit it off. We became kind of friends immediately. And I don't even know where that connection could go at some point, but it's already led to a great discussion once. I'm going to have her help today to explain another amazing subject matter to help you bootstrappers at home. Scherrie is an incredible person. I can see her warm heart when we had our last discussion, so that's what's so great. She's tied to this thing that happened to her growing up is where I'm going to kind of focus today. And her family had a lot of land and, basically, if you will, kind of this handed down, homestead that was lost in the process to the family. And this made you grow up and want to do more to understand financial literacy, to understand protections, to understand law. And that led to Scherrie being a lawyer, and she's working a lot with entrepreneurs. And that's why I thought she would be amazing to have on, because her heart shows to me. And at the same time, one of the biggest things in business is going to be financial literacy. So if you want to learn more about Scherrie as a person, she is absolutely amazing. But today we're going to focus strictly on the knowledge. And so we're going to dive right into it. Scherrie, thanks so much for coming.
Thanks for having me, Tyler.
I always want to give this glowing, especially somebody like you has so much background. It's just I can only do it in so many minutes and still have enough time to get the subject matter. But thank you so much for being on. I appreciate you as a person. I'm excited to the discussion we're going to get into. And I think today what we're going to focus on is really this idea of financially being literate and protections, right? And could you tell me a little bit about more about the story I glanced on, in the beginning about the family farm, or is it a farm?
Yeah, it was a farm. My grandparents had a 150 plus acre farm. And prior to living with my grandparents, my mother had been sick a lot and passed away at the age of 36. So my brother and I just kind of bounced around. And at some point, we stayed with my mother's parents. And it was a great experience, all the love you can definitely have in a family. But when they passed away, they didn't have a will or a trust.
Yeah.
And fast forward, no will or trust. Well, the government has a plan for what happens to your assets with no will or trust. And there was just a lot of division in the family in terms of who gets what. Now, all the land was not lost, but I did have an aunt who lost her portion of the land. And so, it hurt a lot of members of the family because this land had been passed down, 2 generations prior. My great grandfather, his parents were slaves, and we actually lived a few miles down the road from the plantation that he grew up on.
Wow.
And so, it was hard to, know that land had been in our family and some of it had been lost. So that was my first experience with the need for understanding personal finance and estate planning, because a simple will or trust could have kept that property in our family.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And actually, the idea of financial literacy, planning, that sort of stuff anyways, and that's where I thought we could mostly help the bootstrappers with all this, is you have to have a plan around this stuff. It's not even maybe many of them out there aren't about to inherit some sort of farm or ranch or, and the discussion really is financial literacy, understanding these things. And so what are some things your family could understand, base notes, one, on financial literacy, because that was part of what became part of the problem, right?
Right. So you don't have to have a lot of money to have an estate plan. You pretty much have to have a desire to pass the assets and a formal way to do it. So a simple will would have done that for us, or in our case, a family trust. But I start people out a little bit further with some more basic financial tools. I call them the 3 I's. And so, in order for you to pass down property or assets, you have to one, identify what you have. You'd be
Hmm.
amazed at how we acquire things over time, but we don't keep a good record of it.
Yeah.
Okay. And you also have to do an inventory. Once you've identified it, inventory what it is. And for us entrepreneurs, we always, we may start out buying stuff in our personal name because we haven't built business credit, but we're using it for a business purpose. So I tell people the third eye is to improve the classification of
Yeah.
those assets, because what will happen is, you may have a truck that you're using for your company that's in your personal name. So what happens when you get into an accident in that vehicle? They're going to reach into your personal pockets. So I
Yep.
try to start entrepreneurs out with a very basic understanding of personal finance and really understanding what assets should be used in your business versus personally. And if there's, some commingling or crossover, I help you understand how to improve that classification to put a moat around your assets.
Yeah, let's talk about that for a second because a lot of our audience is maybe going to start in the landscaping industry, right? Luckily, they maybe already have a personal truck, and so that puts them a little bit ahead of the game because they got the number one tool that they need. So let's say now I'm a big proponent of right away, you got to start now treating it like a business, right? And we haven't even talked about liabilities yet on the reasons you separate those two things. But let's talk about like taking that truck and now we're going to become a business. What's your advice on how to handle that part?
Okay. What you definitely want to do is you want to set up an entity. A lot of people look at LLCs because they're easy to set up and they're very attractive. And so, a lot of times that will work, but it's really going to depend on the industry. In this instance, we have a landscaping company. So, one, identify who's working with you on your team, your asset protection team. I know it sounds fancy, but it's not. If you're in business and you have a vehicle, you already have an insurance agent. He's
Yeah.
part of your asset protection team.
Yeah.
You already have a bank where you're depositing money, so you have a banker that you're dealing with, part of your asset protection team. And
Yeah.
hopefully, if you don't have an attorney on retainer, you may know a good attorney who can minimally do an operating agreement for you that sets out what you can and can't do within the company, and if you have a partner, what your rights and obligations are. So a lot of people think that throwing insurance at stuff solves all the problems. Well, I'm going to get a lot of insurance. Yes and no. Depending on how big your company is, I like to tell people to look at a three entity system. And so it starts almost like a house. You have the roof, which may be a trust or a will. You have as your frame um, a holding company, and then everything else, your foundation, that's where your insurance and your operating companies kind of go together. And
Mhm.
so that's how you build a moat around your business. So just think about it in terms of with each operating company, you're going to have a three entity structure.
Yeah, no, wonderful advice. I want to just hit that a little bit from my angle too. I call a operating agreement operating in agreement. So it's basically the rules you're setting forth for the company, and like you said, to your point, partner can be a really important part of that. And then separating things, right? So for instance, we could talk like a company owning a building, right? And then having a business in that building, and really, in my opinion, and maybe I'm sure yours too, it's like if you can resources wise separate those entities, right? Because then if something happens in the business, now they can't take the building, and then now they can't take your personal house. So there are a lot of reasons, like Sherrie's point, you separate these things because they become their own person in a way. That's the way I always think it. So I always bring things back to the very basic level, and it's like we want them suing, not all of us, not everything we have in the world. Let them sue that part that they are unhappy with, or whatever, slipped and fell on that, right? So now everything in your life is not pulled into that. And so that's why bootstrappers out there starting with nothing, it's like it is imperative to start with some sort of company separation from your personal assets. So back to the truck, what do you think the best way is for somebody to take a personal asset and then push it into their company?
So what you can do, and this is going to depend in part on the financing for some of that as well.
Mm,
If it's for the business, title it for the business. And then when you get insurance for your business and your commercial vehicle, the insurance for that declarations are a little bit different. So you definitely want to move it over to the business side, and
yep.
having an insurance agent that you work with, if they are already insuring the vehicle, they can actually talk you through that and get you the best coverage possible.
And that's your to your point too. Once again, it's like there's a couple things to have on your team, or people on your team, and a tremendous insurance agent, invaluable, right? Not easy to find overall, honestly. We're going to actually go into a whole episode on insurance here. A great lawyer, attorney, is wonderful to have. Somebody that has your back on things is absolutely imperative. An accountant, CPA, amazing to have. Tax accountant, whether separate or together with the CPA, that's another amazing person to have on your team. But to your point, once again, it's like having a team put together for all this stuff. Business isn't done alone.
Right. And one thing too that people need to consider is, sometimes you're surprised at the end of the year when you have to pay this huge amount back in taxes. That's
Yep.
because maybe what you have is a tax preparer and not a tax planner.
Yeah. Uh, yes. Thank you for saying that. Absolutely.
And there is definitely a difference. You want to make sure, and I mean, it could be the same person, but a tax preparer just takes what you've done in the previous year and they prepare a report, which is your tax return. A
Yeah.
tax planner actually works with you and advises you, this is the best time of year to purchase this. Or, hey, you have, this big thing coming up that you may need a deduction. Or, the government has these incentives that they want to offer you to do certain things. So definitely get a tax planner on your team.
Yeah, absolutely. It can save you so much money. And at the end of the day, I think it's a decent point, even though it's more of a financial episode, to say that it's not the worst thing in the world if you end up having to pay taxes. There's smart ways to involve things into your company, but at the same time, it's a scorecard. Right? It's like it's a scorecard that's going to help you get financing. It's a scorecard that's going to help you get investors down the road. It's a scorecard that's going to help your company be for sale. Basically you keep track of that in your in-house books, but the only gamekeeper, record keeper out there in the world that people are going to listen to is the IRS. So whatever you report to the IRS, that's going to become true. So there is years, and like I said, this gets into a financial episode. There is years where you want to buy a bunch of stuff, and have very low income, so you can build the business. And there is years where you want to show a lot of growth and try to look at it as not paying the man. Try to look at it as like you did a good score that year. You killed it, right? And now the bank's going to look at you and say, I'll take some risk. The investor's going to look at you, wow, I might invest in this company for this. The buyer's going to say, whoa, okay, this is a good asset. I'm going to base some of the way I value your business off that. I know we're getting off there on
I
financials, but
know.
it's imperative. It all comes together. So
And not only that, I mean, if you're the person that has a heart that you want to help your church, you want to help a civic organization, and you have a very good year in your business working with a tax planner, you can earmark where you want a percentage of what you would have paid to Uncle Sam going to a charity or some place like that.
yeah, absolutely. So I'm going to pivot a little bit. And I want to get to the basics of let's talk to a 16-year-old kid. Let's talk to an 18-year-old kid. Let's talk to somebody starting. How do we start getting in the mind of financial literacy?
I like to start with the concept of the dollar plan. And
Hmm.
so with the dollar plan, that you basically earmark where each dollar goes to. So I try, and this is what I tell my children. I have a 16-year-old and a 19-year-old.
Good.
And I let them know, I
Yeah.
love you, but you can't stay here forever. So let's talk about, yeah, let's talk about what is it going to look like if you have to live on your own. And
Yeah.
so we look at a dollar and what percentage of each dollar, how much of this is going to go to food, shelter, transportation. And so we start with the very basics in terms of what it's going to take just to live. And so you don't want to just live, you want to thrive. We put
Yeah.
entertainment in there. So a
Yeah.
basic understanding for every dollar that I make, there's a percentage that I have to pay for taxes. And nobody wants to talk about retirement at 16 years old, but you have to know, just like with a business, you start with the end in mind. So what
Yeah.
is your exit plan? Regardless of
Yeah.
what you want to do, what is your exit plan? You
Yeah.
probably do not want to work or have to work until 70. There may be some things you want to do. So we start with the dollar and we break down what it's going to take. And the thing that my kids are just amazed about is that, what we used to can buy when I was young. I remember buying penny candy at the
Yeah.
store. And
Yeah.
they're like, really, mom? Candy was a penny? So we talk about inflation and things like that.
Yeah.
So starting just with a basic understanding of where each dollar goes And if you're an entrepreneur and you're looking to start a business, same thing with your business. Look at earmarking each dollar and also include a reserve account, which is just a
Yes.
savings account for your business.
Yes, absolutely. One of the things that I get the kind of the most hate for online is when I tell business people that they need to be financially literate before they get into their business. I get a lot of hate for this. It's like, if you're no good with your personal assets, you're going to be horrible with business
Mhm.
finances. Because back me up here, because I hate to say it, but business feels a little bit different, in the terms of what money is, because it's like, oh, it's a business expense, but it's still an expense. So don't let yourself get so far off track that it's like the business is paying for it, like the money feels different. It's like, and then it desensitizes you to money a little bit in your personal life, which is dangerous because it's like, for instance, like one of the things I used to do is I charge off every single piece of our business, right, on a credit card. And don't, please out there, and I'm hesitant to even say this, I'd rather you not have a credit card unless you're extremely disciplined, because this is one of the things that kills businesses. But if you can be extremely disciplined and pay it off every single month, you can get points and things like that for it, right? So, and there's the other side of that too, is you protect yourself from contractors and that sort of stuff too, because in some situations you can charge back the card and they're helping you fight some unfair circumstances. So for that protection and those points, I used to do it, right? And so you're paying $200,000 credit card bill a month. Then your personal stuff becomes so small in comparison, you can actually start to screw up your personal finances too. I think these are what things that people don't think about when it
Yeah.
comes to like financial literacy.
And one thing too, I think one of the biggest things that new business owners don't consider is underfunding. Like being
Yeah.
underfunded when you start. Because think
Yeah.
about this. You may have Joe and Joe makes the best widgets. Nobody can beat Joe making widgets. So
Yeah.
as a creator, he's great, but as a business person, he may not know all the ins and outs. So he starts his business with, less than the capital he needs to sustain.
Yeah. And not only that, and then let's say they do get a little bit of funding or family helps them or something like that, and out there, I'm sorry, bootstrappers, most of you are not going to get funding when you first start beyond, like your family or a silly credit card, which I think you stay away from, for the most part. I just gave you some fun ways to use a credit card, but mostly my advice to bootstrapper is don't have the credit card. Nothing sinks you faster than a credit card, because for these two reasons, if you start with a lot of money or, a little bit of a nest egg, you're going to buy the silly couch. You're going to buy the silly artwork. You're going to buy the things you don't need. One of my favorite stories is, I don't know if you've heard, I got to look it up so I get it better, but there's basically this guy that wanted to get into the belt business. And so there was a machine out there that make belts, and it was $100,000. And he's like, man, and this could have been easily his excuse. Like, I don't have 100 grand. I can't raise it. I can't be in the belt business. But instead he thought about this. And I think this is a key point. If you don't have the 100 grand, which he would have spent, now he's like, okay, I want to still do it. So how can I still do it? And he went out there and went to Home Depot or something, built the machine. It cost him $10,000. And now that machine reinvented the entire industry. So don't get caught up in, I need all this stuff, and like your clients aren't going to care if you offer amazing customer service, if you have a fancy piece of artwork on the wall. I promise you. So don't get caught up in spending a bunch of stupid money or in your own life, huh?
Oh, yeah. And one thing I want to share with folks as well is that, we talked about beginning with the end in mind.
Yeah.
When you start a business, you always need to be thinking about your exit. And so a
Yes.
lot of people think the exit is that I'm going to sell my business. Well, a bankruptcy is an exit, whether you're
Yeah.
dissolving the business or reorganizing. If you don't have a legal structure and you're a sole proprietor, then your death is an exit.
Yeah.
If you have a partnership, it could be the dissolution of the partnership is an exit for that business. So don't just
Yeah.
think about it in terms that I'm going to sell it. And if you're someone who came from, making W-2 income, you may have put your entire retirement into this business. How do you recoup that? How do you get that money back out of the business? Those are some basic things you need to consider before you open your doors. You need to have an exit plan, because those are all events that can, signal the termination of your business.
Oh, absolutely. And to your point too, and something I wasn't smart enough to do in my first business, is like, what's your future plan for the business in general? Because if you're going to go out there, and I kind of disseminate this into, and tell me if you see this in the world. There's two types of entrepreneurs for the most part. They're the ones that build the business and they love running it. They run the operations. They're happy to be involved for a very long term. And then there's people that are kind of like me, you could call it ADD or whatever, but I enjoyed the build of the business. The second the business is building and life becomes somewhat normal, I hate to say it, but when you get out of that struggle phase, I get bored, right? And those are the people that grow a company and sell it usually pretty early on. And it's important to know, to your point, like, where you want to go with the business. Either person is fine,
Mhm.
like to run a business forever is amazing. Just know you run that business a little bit different than the person that's starting it to sell it, right? And so in my first business, I didn't know what I was going to do. So I always ran it like I was going to own it forever, right? Growth, growth, growth at all cost, it's like, and like there's a better way to do that if it's like long-term business, or this is a couple year business for me and I'm going to sell it.
And one thing to consider as well, because the assumption may be that we're just talking about single business owners, but if you have a partner or partners, or if it's a joint venture, there's so many different things you have to consider, and having a good attorney, like we talked about on your team, can help take care of some of that. You may be in business with people that you don't know personally, and you're not sure about their track record. What sort of business entity do you start with? An LLC may be okay, but if you're talking about maybe a different industry, you're talking about a merger, these are all things you just really need to look at the different types of business entities when you first get started as well.
Yeah. Do you want to talk a little bit about those? Throw them out there for them.
Sure. Now the sole proprietorship, which I do not recommend to anybody. You're basically all the liability is on you. You use your social security number, people sue you directly. When you die, the business dies.
Yep.
It's very easy to get in business because you just start transacting.
Yep.
Next, in terms of barriers to entry, the easiest one to get into is an LLC.
Could
So
I
the
hit
great
that last one for a second, just with a
Oh,
couple
sure.
more points? So the first one, a lot of people, this is the way they start, right? You start working on the side or something like that. You're putting your income directly into your personal income, on your tax return, and then all the assets of the business and your company are together. The reason this can be such a problem is, how do you separate your own life from your business life? Number one, and see what's actually going on, and number two, like to Sheree's point, super important. If you don't want them taking your house, your car, different things like that. If you're out there landscaping and you let go of the lawnmower and it happens to run somebody's foot over, you don't want to lose your house, your family's house, your cars, everything in life. So you separate these things out. On to number two. Sorry.
No problem. Number 2, a limited liability company. And with a limited liability company, it's gonna differ if you're a single member or a multiple member LLC in terms of how in the event that you pass, your estate is separated. And also what you want to take into account of, if you are a multiple member LLC, and this is something that I did not do with my first business, you want to make sure that you have something that's very similar to what's called a spousal consent form.
Yep.
What does that do?
Yeah.
Because this happened to me in my very first business. I was in business with a partner and he was married. I don't know what was going on at home, but his wife walked in one day and said, "Hey, I'm your new partner. You're going to be dealing with me."
Yep.
And did not like that at all, but we just had a handshake. We did not even have an operating agreement. And I mean,
Yeah.
an operating agreement is the minimum you need to
Yeah.
have with the LLC. So, having a spousal consent form that outlines what the rights of the spouse are at all times and in the event of death, priceless,
Yeah.
priceless. So yeah, so multiple member LLC or single member, they're handled differently in different states. I'm in Mississippi. So
Yeah.
in Mississippi, if you die and you have a single member LLC, your family has 90 days to wrap everything up, or there's a process for it. So they're handled a little bit differently. Now that's a document that you will file with the state that you're living in.
Yeah.
Next, you have a corporation. And all of these entities are like a separate person sitting at the table with you, and they have formalities. Now, the difference between a corporation and an LLC are some of the formalities. And the thing that will really get you is if you don't follow these formalities. I know it sounds like it's hard to do, but you pretty much just one, don't commingle assets. If you have
Yes.
a corporation, you're required to have meetings and keep minutes. And I tell my people with LLCs, do the same thing. They're not always as formal as a corporation, but keeping good records, there's a clear indication of what you intend to do in the business, especially if you have partners. Now, you do have different types of partnerships. With the partnerships, your liability is based on your interest in the partnership. And some folks think they may be in a partnership, but it may be a joint venture. So a joint venture more so is like when you have two companies that come together to maybe to form a third company or a
Mhm.
company and an individual. And there are several different ways to do it. But just get a good understanding. And if you put the people together that are on your asset protection team and you start, I would recommend even having annual meetings with them and talking about the direction for your business. It could be that as part of your three entity structure, you have all of these things
Yeah.
because you may start with a trust, you may have a holding company, you may also have a management or marketing company that is a corporation, and your service companies may be LLCs. But it's going to really depend on what you need, and you don't have to start there. If we're just talking about basics, get you one entity. If you have an LLC, get a good operating agreement with a spouse's consent form if
Yeah.
necessary. And if you have a corporation, make sure you have bylaws, and that you keep minutes of your meetings. I'm sorry.
Yeah. Well, and to your point too, it's like know where you want to go, know where you want to end, and know what you want to become, because those are the different types of companies that you probably want to think about starting. If you're going to become a small business forever, yeah, we just told you we don't like sole proprietorships, but you could probably stay in that. You could probably be fine with an LLC, but then if you want to think grand and big and that sort of thing, then you got to think about going to a corporation at least if you want to have multiple investors, if you want to have different protections, that sort of stuff. And there's all kinds of tax strategy reasons you do each sort of company, but there's also expenses too. And so when I teach people business stuff around here, I always work in the good, better, best world, right? Um, let's talk about some for the bootstrappers. It's not always easy for them to have multiple companies, multiple different things going on, because you're talking about now expenses in multiple tax returns and keeping on the ball, folks, too. When you open up something, like, do you see this stuff online, by the way, that's like open 16 LLCs and now you're going to
Yes.
be wealthy? Yeah, it's like, let's talk about the downsides of that for a second. You give me yours first. I want to hear what you think about the 16 levels of LLC strategy.
One is not necessary. If you know what you're trying to do and where you are, basics. You need a company and you need some sort of document that governs how the company's run. Like I
Yeah,
mentioned, if it's an LLC, you need an operating agreement. If it's a corporation, you need bylaws. And
yeah,
so having that, and also a lot of people think that having standard operating procedures is for big companies. Now, you don't need 10,000, but you do need a couple.
yeah,
And the one that I tell folks that you must have is a cash management and handling policy. How do you receive funds into your business, and how do you deposit that funds, and how are they reported? So those
yes,
are just some basic things that I think you need in your business in terms of SOPs, um, and also a contractor and employee onboarding and training. I know it
yeah,
might sound fancy,
yeah.
but you just have something basic for how you train your employees coming in, because it cuts down on turnover. And if you have less turnover, you have people that are in your business, you're becoming more efficient. So those are some of the basic things that I think bootstrappers need.
Yeah, absolutely. And you and I could talk for 4 hours because we could touch finance, we could touch legalities, we could touch. I mean, 16 times I've been thinking in my mind, it's like maybe we should talk about piercing the corporate veil, in a lot of different ways. And it's like, but it is like bringing back it to people when they start. And one thing I notice, and like everybody has a lens for the world. And one thing that's amazing about Shreve, in my opinion, is you notice how she keeps talking about the end game, right? She keeps coming back to the end game of what your business is. And this is based on, sorry for me to pre-assume, but I'm reading you while we're talking. And it's like, it's based all back on the original story we told you about the farm, right? It's like, this is a lesson that she had to learn the hard way, right? And
Yes.
because of that, I mean, it did turn some amazing things around for you in life. You became a lawyer, you became an advocate for these groups of people, but that's why her lens is so heavy on the end game, is this like thing that happened with their family. Because we learned it wasn't your mistake by any means. And your family, I dare not even want to really call it a mistake on their part. They just didn't know. It's like, but let's talk about mistakes for a minute. It's like, tell me one of the biggest mistakes you learned from.
One of the biggest mistakes I back in '05, I had 2 mortgage brokerages and,
Wow.
rocking and rolling, and that was a time when you can get, like, 100% financing on an investment property with a 500 credit score. Crazy, right?
Yeah.
Crazy.
Yeah.
Okay. So, we were just rocking and rolling, and because, I didn't have all the skills and the tools that I have now, I did not see the mortgage crisis coming. So,
Yeah.
fast forward to '08, I literally lost everything.
Oh, wow.
Lost it. And that's when I went to law school. After dealing with my family, dealing with the loss of my mortgage brokerage, and, at that time, I had a 6-year-old and a 3-year-old,
Yeah.
and I really became passionate because I'm like, "This does not have to happen to anybody."
Yeah.
But part of the problem was some of those same systems that I now know and that are in place in my current business, I didn't have them then. I did
Mhm.
not have, a track on the numbers. I was not able to forecast. And I would probably say, even though that was my biggest failure, it was the best setup for me because it was like a wake-up call. I mean,
Yeah.
imagine waking up and having a very successful business, um, and then the next day you don't have anything, you know.
Yeah.
So
And then it comes back to that, like, financial literacy stuff. It's like, we need to plan for good days and bad days, right?
yeah,
So, and then invest our you one of the first things you said today is, talking about, like, where does that dollar go, And it's like, you should always be worried about that in business and in life. And, like, the power I mean, do you wanna go into the time value of money a little bit? It's like let's talk about that for a second because I think that's imperative, jumping back to, like, the 16-year-olds on why they should think about why that dollar invested is so important.
yeah, and I know you said time value of money. One thing too that I look at it from the standpoint of the cost of inaction.
Yes.
Because
Yeah.
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 So, today your business may be making $100,000 just as an even number.
Yeah.
But if you do X, Y, and Z to improve your business, look at the dollar plan, look at your investment, your time, and the things that you're putting into the business, you could be a $500,000 a year business. So what's the difference? That's $400,000 difference for making small tweaks in your business and having the right foundation. So a lot of people think that just not doing anything or putting it off is not costing them anything, but it's actually costing you in this example $400,000 a year. That's the cost of inaction for just not
Wow.
doing anything.
Well put. Or financial literacy. You wanna go out there and the second your business has a success and you wanna buy the brand new car, the Ferrari
No.
or something like that. It's like, now what if you put that same couple 100 grand into a new piece of equipment? Now we've got not only something that's more functional for the long term, but at the same time, you've just thrown a barrier. I mean, that was one of the biggest things that was a win for me in my business. I didn't take salary the first couple years, and one of the things I was able to do is I was able to throw barriers to entry and things that made me money in the business over and over again. One of my first huge purchases was the second largest powder coat oven in the city. My competition couldn't touch me anymore. I was the only one doing my own powder coating for my car builds. It's like, it took some sacrifice. It had to be smart here. I had to be disciplined because instead of buying the fancy whatever it is, I put that into the powder coat oven, right? And that reaped dividends that we were always gaining from. Just one example of using your money to make future money, right? And presenting it towards future values. Um, let's talk about, like, that for a second. It's like, so we have some extra money in our business or in our life. It's like, let's talk about the way you plan with that extra money, right? I've got an extra 20 grand. I can pull this in, let's say it's in my personal life or my business life. So we got an extra 20 grand. Let's talk about a smart way to strategize with that extra 20 grand.
Okay. One, if you're in business, you always need to have a certain amount of liquidity, money that you can get to for emergencies and things like that. But a lot of people don't plan for, and it took me a minute to really get it. I may have lots of insurance. That's great. But do I have a certain amount set aside in my reserve account for those claims? I may have a $1,000, $5,000 deductible. Do I have that set aside? And is that separate from the liquid funds that I have in my business? So, one thing
Yeah.
that I do and I hate to call it extra money because I like to
Yeah.
have everything earmarked, but
Yeah.
I make sure that I have money set aside for deductibles. In a separate account, a reserve account, I have a liquid account that accounts for a certain percentage of what I'm liable for in my business. Um, Also, taxes and maintenance. I have separate
Yeah.
accounts for that because if you're working with a tax planner, you pretty much know what you may be liable for from year to year in your taxes because you're getting your books done, hopefully monthly, but if not quarterly. So you're seeing your numbers all the time. And if you own your own equipment and or buildings, you want to make sure that you have repair funds set aside for the maintenance and upkeep of those buildings to keep your insurance premiums down.
Yeah, absolutely. And to your point, it all comes back to like how we value a dollar. And in my opinion, a large amount of financial literacy is discipline, right? It is it is hard not to want to go out and buy the new car, right? But that's not the smart thing at all. What do you talk to people on the emotional level? I think a lot of this becomes emotion. Like you'll make that make sense. Oh, I worked so hard for this. Oh, my clients need to see me in something fancier because that's what's going to be like the key to the business. We'll make excuses all day long to get that fancy car instead of putting the money into your business. So let's work about the mental discipline. What's your advice on getting people to discipline towards the proper ends instead of the immediate gratification?
Well, you have to understand the peaks and valleys in your business. Like,
Yeah.
let's go back to your landscaping. Like during the rainy season, you may not be making as much money because it's raining outside. So you can't get out there and maintain yards for people. So that's going to be a valley in your business. You're not going to be making as much money, but you want to make sure that the income you have coming into the business is level over a period of time to sustain you and any employees you have and expenses. So I really try to get people to see um, that it's not just that you have this windfall and all this extra money. If you're in business for the long haul, then you want to make your company attractive. And also, if your exit strategy is to sell, one way to be attractive is to have, your business financially stable and your books looking really good to somebody who may want to invest in your business or purchase your business.
Yeah. I have a friend who's a accounting teacher at a college, and she said she had somebody stand up recently. I don't need this accounting stuff. I'm going to be a business person. I'm going to own my own company. And that is the silliest thing I ever heard. Everybody wants the fancy marketing stuff, right? I need the furniture. I need the car to go out there and talk to clients. Nobody wants to talk about finances, right? And that's one thing I love about you because you talk about it as much as I do because we know that's where the importance is. The gurus online, the reason they talk about these other fancy things is because that catches your attention and it's not provable or disprovable. So you don't need to be a good business person to say, "Oh, just go out there and, get it done and rah rah rah," like we talk about the fundamentals because that's what's going to make your business to success. Some of the stuff we're going over right now is not a lot of fun, right?
Not
corporate
at all.
corporate strategy, the long term of like what happens after you pass away. These are not fun things, but it's all about planning, and business is about planning. I'm going to pivot now because I want to show people your heart a little bit while we're on, because we only have about 20 minutes left. And so let's talk about why you do this. Why do you get out there and you try to help people with these things, using your mistakes, using the wins? What is it that gets your heart going towards people with their businesses?
Well, it really starts at home. Um, I really, missed having a family unit. I grew up um, watching television and seeing families and things like that. And so my household was different. We had a lot of love, but we just did not have these conversations. And so when I look at my daughter Madison and my son Dylan, I just don't ever want them to have to figure it out. And
Yeah.
so, how great is it that I can help somebody else not have to figure it out and I can still make a living, and take care of my family. So I just saw so much of it. And being in Mississippi, we are last on the list for all the great stuff. I mean, all the bad stuff. And first on the list for all the bad stuff and last on the list for all the good stuff. So
Yeah.
anytime that I can, make a shift and help somebody, I would love to do it because now that I understand these things, it's not that they're hard. They're not always expensive. You just have to know or have a way to get to someone who does know. A mentor or a coach or just some resource because none of these concepts, require you to have advanced degrees. Just a basic understanding. And even with having a team, if you start getting your insurance agent, your banker, your tax preparer, let them start talking to each other about your business. Authorize them to do that. It's going to cut down on some of what you have to do because you give them the directive on what to do to help move your business further faster. And there's just so many things that I understand now. And I just, out of everything else that I've tried to do, because I've tried different areas of the law in my practice, never really liked it. But this is
Hmm.
the thing that resonates with me the most.
I should have you give the intro for underdogs because everything you just said, down to like making sure your kids knew some of this stuff, to me, that's the most important part. Everybody talks about, oh, like they have a rich uncle, they have a rich dad, and so they got fun and they have connections. That's not the biggest part. It's the information and education, which is what this show seeks to do. It's like to stand in for that information. We might not be giving you the connections for say, but I'm telling you how to get them. We might not be giving you the money per se, because I'm telling you most businesses start with $6,000. And honestly, if you're not financially literate enough to save out $6,000, and I'm sorry, bootstrappers, underdogs, you got to go out there and work 2, 3 jobs. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. That's the way it is. But look at the benefits to that. The benefits are in your business, you're working 80, 90, 100 hours a week anyways. You'll be used to it. You won't have time to spend any of it. You'll build a work ethic, which is incredible for your future goals. It's like, I think every downside is actually an upside to starting your business. And it's up to people like you and I, Scherrie, to fill in that part, right? If they're willing to work hard and do those things, I think it's up to us, being fellow underdogs, being fellow bootstrappers, to help them with the educational component that you and I had to get our butts kicked on, right? And that's probably why. Is that why you enjoy doing it? Is because you get to help somebody save somebody a butt kicking?
Look, definitely. And one thing that we did not touch on that I like to share with folks is if you are someone who's leaving a job to become an entrepreneur full time and you're talking about income replacement, you may
Yeah,
be making $50,000 at your W-2 job. Well, you need to make more than 50,000 as an entrepreneur, because what are you doing now? You're giving up your insurance, you're giving up your retirement, and you may have some other fringe. So when you're making projections for your business, or you're trying to calculate what it's going to take for you to maintain your household, because you still have to have that personal finance piece in there once you become
yeah,
an entrepreneur, you need to be making more than $50,000. So just get the number of widgets you need to totally replace all of that.
yeah, totally. And I just gave you the reason why being personally financially literate and disciplined, it takes a lot of discipline. And then even if you're okay at that and you jump into the business is going to desensitize you to money. I promise you. The second you have 10, $20,000 rent bills, what do you think your household rent feels like? It feels small. Because the second you have $4,000 a month a power bill, your one at home feels small, but you still got to keep that ship in order too. So the business can actually ruin somebody that's an okay financially literate personal person, because you jump over here to the business. Now you're desensitized to huge money. It's like $200,000 credit card and you're just sending that money out. You start to like think, oh, okay, well, my 3,001 at home's not that big. But, if you can't run the ship at home, you can't run the ship in business either. And thinking about every single dollar and where it's going. I love that Mr. Wonderful thing actually on Shark Tank. Usually I'm downplay on Shark Tank, but one thing I love is what Mr. Wonderful says about sending his dollars out into the world. It's like you send that dollar out, right? And you want it to come back with more, right? So if you think about every single one of them as being a teammate going out there to get more, if you spend it on, and I'm not the one to say never have the coffee, but if you spend it on a coffee, that one's never coming back, right? So what can you spend it on to make it come back with friends, as he says?
Love it.
So how do we get them to wrap into where you and I already are with this discipline being important around financial literacy? What is something we can rah-rah them? What's something what you do to rah-rah your kids? Because right now they're just thinking, it's like, sure, mom, I'll spend my dollars on a skateboard. I'll spend my dollars on an Xbox. I'm not going to think about retirement or anything like that. What are some ways you use to help with that?
Yeah, it's not the most exciting thing to talk about for most people if you're looking at a business. I look at how I plan my time and my energy, because if I can show you how to take that dollar and have more time for your family, invest more, put that money towards charities or other civic organizations that you love, and not have to work as hard. Is that
Yeah.
attractive to you? Is that more exciting to you? And so those are some of the things I try to open up to people. Like, you can still be an entrepreneur You can have time freedom, financial freedom, but there are just a few things you have to put in place. And when you start showing people how easy it is, it's not as expensive as you thought it was going to be. The first thing they think about hiring an attorney, oh, that's a lot of money. Well, there are some, do it yourself options that you have to get you started and and some low cost things to get you started. So that's one way I try to get them, the buy-in. It's like, hey, I can do this. And you show them how they can do it with help, and you show them the resources that they already have. Because a lot of
Yeah.
the people that you need in your team, you're already talking to. And so you just show them what's possible.
Yeah, absolutely. I hope you don't mind. I'm going to steal a little bit of this episode to plug Glaive a little bit on that note because it falls in perfect. You know what we do here, like with Glaive, don't you, at my facility?
You told me that you help, like, people can actually come in and they can get assistance, or you kind of mentor people as well, businesses.
Yeah, and so everything you're talking about is something that we strive to do. For instance, we had our first seminar on Wednesday. We had 120 RSPPs and we had 100 people show up.
That's
Excuse me,
awesome.
probably, yeah, maybe around, we didn't count it, but maybe around 70, 80 people show up somewhere in there. And we do that 100% for free. And so a lot of people stayed till the end, and I had this big long line of people talking to me, and they would be like, you know what? I went to a $700 class and it didn't teach me near what you guys did for free. And there's one guy's like, so much value. Thank you so much. It's like, next time at least let us bring the food, because not only did you give us this information, you fed us, and then we do the seminars, to your point, because this is what I believe exactly like you believe. And I believe that we have to give them the education. That's why we do the free seminars. The other thing we do is we have a free workspace. And I think that, and it kind of frustrates me that I feel like we do a lot for I'm going to be the next Facebook world. Build your business plan here. We'll help you get investors, the big business wannabe world, but we don't do much for small business, in my opinion. So we have a workspace here. You can come in anytime, just like those bigger want to be companies. I'm not talking wannabes, want to be companies, but you can come in and use our workspace anytime. We have somebody in here right now. They're working on their trademark. So they're sitting at their desks every day. We're popping over there, helping with their trademark stuff. Group of guys working on their website originally tried to hire us, and we're like, instead of paying this immense amount of money to have us build out a website, why don't you just come in, sit at the desk, and learn how to do it? You have the best website guy in the world, my business partner, right across the room. He jumps over there all the time and helps him with the next step of the website. And so we really feel that those things are imperative. The other thing I do is, in my schedule, I slot out at least 10 appointments a week, so you can come down and sit down on anything you want to talk about and get help with it. So I want to thank you for allowing me to kind of put that in there on your episode, because I feel exactly like you do, and that's the tool we're trying to use. And I know you're doing a lot with that. How are you? What's the best way to get a hold of you and get some help from you? If you're not in Phoenix, I wish Shreve was, because I'd have her down here every other day helping me with mine, but we're far apart. So what's the best way to get help from you out there?
So I have a free Facebook group, and there's no promotions, no spam. We literally are in there answering questions. We're doing trainings. People are raising their hands. They're asking questions, and they're getting help with their businesses. So that's one way. It's a small business owners, entrepreneurs, and solopreneurs Facebook group. But if you want to just talk to me directly, you can send me a message on LinkedIn, and it's Scherrie. It's at Scherrie Speaks on LinkedIn, and that's the best way. And I try to get in there every day and respond if you have any questions. And I also do a free webinar once a month, and it gives you that blueprint. So if you are interested and you're ready to look at maybe a 3 entity structure, or just get some basics on the personal finance side, because we go over both. It's an hour-long webinar once a month, and it's usually on the second Thursday of the month. You can check that out as
Okay.
well.
We should partner on something sometime and do like a seminar on something. I really want to bring experts in here too, or we can plug it in remote for if you can't make the trip. But we should try to do some sort of seminar together. Our goal is to do at least one a month here. And I love what you're doing. I see what you're doing, and how many lawyers out there in the world are telling you, pop into my LinkedIn and send me a message, and I'm not going to charge you $700 an hour. Now I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, I was just laughing because people think that, and I don't charge for stuff like that.
I've gotten to the point in my career where I'll help you with everything, I could possibly help you with, if you want to help yourself.
Well, and I'll tell you this, it makes me better.
Yeah.
because when people bring me questions, if it's something that I know off the top of my head, okay, I'm going to answer it, but I also want to make sure that I'm staying on top of stuff. So if
Yeah.
these are the problems that people are having, I'm trying to find new solutions to help with new problems. And I just love it because it just makes me a better coach, it makes me a better attorney, and it makes me a better person.
Yeah.
So, you think that I'm helping you, you're actually helping me as well. So,
Totally. Not only like I'm with you, like when we're solving these problems all the time, it reminds us, right? Because a lot of times it's been 10 years since I've dealt with something like that, right? And so it brings back that memory. I'm like, okay, yeah, I remember that. Or it brings up a new situation, you're right, that we're solving together and it makes me better for the next person. And
mhm.
so not only that, but like here it keeps me going. It's like we had a lady from our seminar come in and she's like, I just needed to be around you guys for an extra 10 minutes. She just dropped by after the seminar. And, we hear that about this place all the time. It's like, I'm blessed to find this place. It's like, and I just wanted to be around you guys for a little while. And I want to make it a point to say this, and I'm sure Scherrie will back me up. That's why one of the major reasons I wanted to have her on, because I felt like we think so similar in this regard. But it's like the second you start helping others, you'll be amazed at how much your life changes, like in a way that you can't even imagine. A friend of mine asked me at one point, she's like, Tyler, I want you to have joy in your life. And I was running first world businesses, like to all accounts, like everybody thought I had the most incredible businesses of all time. It's like so cool what you do, so cool who you get to interact with every day. I was miserable. And then I switched over and I started working in businesses that made differences in things. And along the way, a person that never thought they would have joy. I'm like, joy's not for me. I'll try to help other people because I'm miserable. It's like a joy's not for me. But I found joy through this process. Like I love helping people change their lives. And this is one of the biggest ways, even though it's like a first world thing of making money. This is the one of the biggest ways, in my opinion, we change lives.
Oh, yeah. I had one friend that told me, she said, just because you can do something does not mean you should. And it took me a minute to get here. Like I said, um, I was a mortgage broker, I had some other things, real estate broker, and none of it really gave me joy either. And at the time, I didn't know that I was missing that joy. But what I do now makes me feel great because when I'm able like to help a family keep their land, for generations, I'm able to help a single mom, put together something for her minor children. Those types of things make me smile on the inside. And so, I never knew that I was missing something until I actually got it. And it's like, okay, I'm in the right spot.
Oh, thanks for backing me up on that because it's until you experience it, and don't to be fair, you and I had to go through those other businesses and things too. We had to, and you have to get out there and you have to make money in the world because it's too hard to help other people if you can't help yourself. But then, once you can get there, you can use what you've learned like we are, to change things. And so like talking about end-to-end business plan, end-to-end life plan, like you mentioned in the beginning, it's like what's amazing is you start your first business, you learn from it by getting your butt kicked. You start another business, you learn a couple more things, you get your butt kicked, and then you fix those, and you get better and better at it. And the next thing you know, those butt kickings can mean something because you can help people with them.
Exactly.
And when we're thinking to the end of our days on earth, it's like if we haven't helped a couple people along the way, I guarantee you'll sit on that deathbed and you'll be like, man, I should have. And so,
And one thing to consider, don't worry about it being perfect when you start. Just get started, get it done. You can perfect it
yes.
along the way. Put
Yeah.
together whatever you need to put together to get started, but just make sure that as time passes, you're, getting the people around you to help you with that business because, building a business is almost like raising a child. It takes a village, it takes a team. And, I
Yeah.
harp on team and exit plans. That's when you hear me talk, I'm talking about exits and a team. So those
Yeah.
things are important.
And I find that so interesting about our discussion today is like, I know that like, that's the way your story starts and how you got into all this. And you really focus on that end game a ton. And that just goes to show you, it's like, you could go through some hard stuff like you did, some unfair stuff, some things that make you sad. And now you've used it to like, that's where your focus is on helping, it feels like to me. Would you say that's true?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I don't even look at it as failure now. I look at it as, an opportunity to pivot, an opportunity to do something different. Like, hey, this didn't work. Let me try something else. Because it's so easy to beat yourself up and say, oh, this didn't work or I wasn't good at this. But there's something that you're great at, there's something that you're destined for. So just keep going.
I agree. And it doesn't have to be us in the world, but if you get anybody out there that's trying to teach you something and they don't talk once about their mistakes, it means they haven't done it. I'm sorry. They're plain and simple. I mean, Sheree, would you agree that like we use our mistakes more than anything else to teach because that's where we learn the most?
Definitely. Had my businesses not failed, I probably would not be close to where I am now in terms of with my business because I would have thought that, hey, I've made it, I've arrived. But I was a hot mess. Looking back, the way that I was running business before now was a hot mess. And yeah, so sometimes it takes those hard knocks to kind of wake you up and see where you need to be and to position you for the future.
And that's why you underdogs need this, because guess what happens? I call them the golden couch boy. If they've got a father, grandfather, whatever, with a lot of money that's getting them into business, they don't have to follow the same rules. They can also fail a lot, and then it's just another float of a loan. That keeps them going. You out there, bootstrapper, you don't have that immense amount of time, choices, fallback plans. So we talk a lot about our mistakes too, because you can't make as many, right? It's like, or like we can make those mistakes and we barely slide it through, right? To get into the next business. So learn from those mistakes that we've made. And now that way it helps you slide through because you don't have that person that's going to hand you a bunch of money to get you through your next mistake. Everybody makes them. It's just the way that you can fix them, right? We're trying to get you to fix them with information and be fixing it before it happens because you can't afford it. The other side is the rich dad who's just going to give you a little bit more money to get you past your mistake, right?
Exactly.
I mean, that's what it all boils down to in my mind. And I can't thank you enough. I think we got a couple minutes left, and so what is it that you think, let's wrap this towards the financial way we started it. What is the number one way that they're going to practice being just a little bit better with their personal finances?
Consistency and repetition as it relates to reviewing your assets, inventorying your assets, and improving the classification of your assets because you can't protect them if you do not know what they are and where they belong. And so I
Yes.
think that really is the basis. And so we talk about assets, cash, vehicles, your house, your investments. You just have to have an understanding for how they fit in your personal life and how you're infusing those things into your business. And once you have that basic understanding for those things, you can, take quantum leaps in your business as it relates to your business finances.
Absolutely. And one tool that I use all the time actually around here to help people like start to understand this, it used to be called something different. It's called Rocket Money now. They just bought that company and it basically, I don't get paid by them, by the way, and in fact, they won't even partner with me or anything, but I do use this all the time to teach people the first start to financial literacy. And actually this segues into when I can teach you accounting. If you'll do this, like I can teach you accounting so much quicker, it's ridiculous. But basically, you download Rocket Money in your phone, you connect your personal bank accounts to it, and every time a transaction comes in, you're chalking that up in one way, shape, or form. Just like Scherrie said, it's like now we know where that money's going, though, in this app, right? And it used to be donations. I don't know what they charge now. I think it's $5 or something like that. And so that's an amazing way to start, right? Because then when you start chalking off these expenses, you see at the end of the month that, oh man, I spent $50,000 on Uber Eats. I got to stop that habit. I've even done this in my own life. I used to Uber Eat all the time, right? And then I started looking at what I was actually spending on. I'm like, this is not worth it. There's no way that somebody should be able to spend thousands of dollars on Uber Eats a month. And so it's like you think you're spending it, but then it's like this puts it in your face, right? And I think that's one of the first steps is like starting to understand that. So I hope that this episode taught you a little bit about financial literacy. I think one more way that I can back up this episode is, Shree, the Pied Piper story, huh?
I do, but I'm gonna let you tell it.
Oh, I was going to make you tell it. And so the Pied Piper, right? He goes into town and the king says, and correct me if I start to mess up the story or add to it. So, and the king says to the Pied Piper, I got all these rats in the kingdom, right? I need to get rid of the rats. It's like they're eating all the bread. They're, diseases, all this stuff. By the way, cats are the one that spread most of the diseases, if I remember right, during the plague. It wasn't rats. Don't hold me that out there, audience, but I think so. So anyways, king goes, get rid of the rats, Pied Piper. I'll pay you anything you want. And the Pied Piper goes, okay, I'll get rid of the rats. You give me 1 kernel of rice a day, but you have to double it. The king's like, oh, that's cheap deal, right? Sends the Pied Piper out. 30 days later, you can imagine how it compounds that rice kernel. 1 kernel, tomorrow, 2. The next day, 4. Next day, 8. When it gets to the end of the month, it's unachievable. Your business finances, your money finances, the money that you spend properly over time has an immense value. And if we're talking back to the 16-year-old kid, that it's immensely difficult to put that away. But it is worth so much money. I mean, I should have brought some figures onto the show. Maybe I'll throw some on the end on like how you can invest $100 at 16 and what it becomes by the time you're 50. It's the time value of money, right? It's Mr. Wonderful's marching $1 out to the world, and that dollar comes back with $1.07, let's say, invested. Now, next time you're making money off the dollar and the 7 cents. Do the math on this at home. It's crazy.
Right.
The second I started thinking about this way, I started analyzing every dollar more. And it's important for your business. It's important with your personal life. So I really hope this touch on finance was helpful. Shree, thank you for it. Like, I feel like we need to do an episode around like business structures, breaking the corporate shield, or excuse me, the piercing the corporate veil. Like there's all that stuff. But I hope that our focus on finance today was helpful for people.
Oh, I hope so as well. And, don't let this be scary. If it's something that you haven't thought about, you just got to get started. You just have to take the first step to get started.
Yeah. And Scherrie is amazing. Please follow her on her podcast. I'm going to let you plug everything really quick. Social media, podcast, like where the webinar's at, all that stuff, please.
Okay. So I can be found on all socials at Scherrie Speaks. And, that's Instagram, LinkedIn, Twitter, all that. And the best way to find me is my website, www.scherrieprints.com. And the free webinar once a month is at www.scherrieprints.com/AP Blueprint, which is Asset Protection Blueprint. And you can just come and grab a seat and, learn how to get started with a basic plan for your life, finances, and your business.
Amazing. And Sherrie's awesome, everybody. Follow her. She's out there doing this in the world for you folks, trying to help you. And Scherrie, we should find a class or something to do together. I always like it when we get together. And that's one of the powers to podcasting too. I gave in my seminars, like I've had some incredible people I've connected to and referred people to. And, you're one of them. I'm glad to have you in my network. I'm appreciative of you coming out to Bootstrappers today. And I hope we can do it again soon.
Oh, look, thank you. And I forgot to give them the name of my podcast. It's the Play Big Faster podcast. So
Yes.
check out Tyler's episode of my podcast. He did a great job.
Oh, thank you. And I told Scherrie afterwards, it's like, I'm still trying to figure out this interview thing. And like, I got so many tips just being on her show too. So, another great way, Bootstrappers, to start networking is by starting a podcast, which we'll go over probably in an episode here. I'm going to wrap it up, Scherrie, but thanks so much for coming in. Stick around for a minute afterwards, please. So.
Will do.
Thank you, Underdogs, for joining us once again for episode 6. I hope you got something out of the financial chapter. We're going to branch off, and so don't worry about accounting quite yet. We'll talk about a lot of the specifics of today in a subsequent episode. Please stick with us. Give me feedback, too. Tell me what's helpful and what's not. This is all for you. Thanks so much for tuning in. We'll see you next time.